This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is February 10th, 2020, and I am conducting an interview with Bill Witthans in Sun City, Arizona. Bill, would you please give me your full name and where you were born?
William James Witthans, born in Park Ridge, Illinois.
Okay, thank you. And what war did you participate in?
In the Cold War.
Okay, thank you. Before we started, did you grow up in Illinois then? Did you stay there through your childhood?
I did.
And did you graduate from high school in Illinois?
I graduated from high school in the county, or in the township I was born in, yes.
And how did you find your way into military service from high school?
I was drafted.
What year was that?
I got a selective service notice to report for physical on 1 November 1961.
Okay.
There were three of us, about 6 months apart. One of my buddies was 3 months older. And he got his draft notice, I'm going to guess probably in December of 1961. Not to report until 62. So the three of us went and volunteered for the draft, so all three of us would be drafted and going at the same time, which we did. And my draft date is 26 March 1962.
Okay, well, 1962 we had a lot of things going on. The Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a lot of tension between East Germany, Russia, and the United States. There was a lot of things happening. Were all three of you sent to the same place for basics then?
We were sent to Fort Knox, Kentucky in March. We spent March, April, I guess part of May at basic training at Fort Knox, which is where the gold is. And it was pretty cold weather. It's cold weather in Kentucky. And we're up early, calisthenics, doing a lot of PT, assigned duties, KP, guard duty, all of the normal things you do as a draftee. And there was three major hills that we had to climb on hikes. And they all had names. One of them was Drag Ass Hill, Misery Hill, and take me a minute to think of the other one. Heartbreak Hill, and they were named truly.
Which one was the worst?
Probably Heartbreak.
Heartbreak?
Remember the sergeant on a forced march would say, somebody would break out and say, I need a break, need a rest. There's no rest. Sergeant said, I'm going to get to the top of the hill and start down, you'll have all the rest you'll ever need. So no break.
How long would it take to go to the top and back down?
Oh, well, on the other side?
Yes.
Various times. Some of them were 5-6 hours. Some of them were shorter. We had a good sergeant, good drill sergeant, but a tough, no crap. He didn't put up with any crap. A good guy.
Yeah. So how long were you at basic
Knox.
training? Yeah, at Fort Knox.
What is it? I think it's either 8 or 10 weeks. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, generally at that time it was probably 8, but it might have been 10. So what were you focused on some type of advanced training from there, or did they tell you where you were going to go?
When you were drafted, you get a battery of tests to determine what your MOS is going to be. And I tested good on Morse code. Since I had worked for the railroad prior to being drafted, I knew the Continental Morse code pretty well. And when we had these battery of proficiency tests, I scored pretty high on Morse code, so I went to be a radio operator.
Mm-hmm. How long was it that you worked with the railroad before you went into the service?
About 3 years.
Really? What were you doing with the railroad before you went in?
Signal communications work.
So that all really kind of helped you out when you got into service, it sounds like.
Right in, yeah.
So how far ahead of time did they let you know where you were headed after basics?
Not very long. I'm going to guess a week at the most. By the time we graduated from basic training, I think we had a week leave to go back home, to see our folks. And by that time, I had my orders. And they said to go to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for deployment to Germany.
So where was your advanced schooling at?
Oh, that's right, we're ahead of ourselves. After basic, I went home for a week, and then they sent me to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for radio school training.
And I'm assuming that was a little longer time period?
That was like 10 weeks. Intense Morse code.
And a lot of that, your previous railroad training helped you out with?
Probably, yeah, probably did.
How large a class was it that was going through with you at the time? Do you have any idea?
I would guess probably 20, 25.
And then from there, this is probably, what, summertime now of 1962?
It'd be August, early August.
And that's when they sent you to Fort Dix from there?
Right, on August 17 August 1962, I had orders to go to Fort Dix, New Jersey for transportation and deployment to Germany. And I went to Germany on a troop ship, the USNS Buckner, which was a World War II troop ship, still in service.
Buckner?
Buckner. Still in service, and we got to Germany 5 days later, docking at Bremerhaven.
So you knew you were going to Germany only about a week ahead of time when you took off?
After
or
radio
boarded?
school, yes, right.
Where were other options, possibilities for you going to? Do you have any idea?
I had no idea.
Were you with any of the other classmates of yours that went through radio
We
school?
were. There were five or six of us that graduated from radio school that all went to the same place in Germany.
Well, that made it a little handy for those of you
We
who
had some friends going in.
Yeah. Did any of your three buddies from Illinois, were any of them ever
One.
made it with you through radio school?
One, yeah, a fellow by the name of Russell Swetzik. He was from Little Island or someplace in the south side of Chicago. And the other four guys were Minnesota, Philadelphia. Can't remember for sure.
So you're in Germany now. You're in Bremen, and where were you headed from there?
They put us on a train. We went to Fulda, Germany, which is northeast of Frankfurt. And it's right on the east-west German border at the time, about 3 or 4 miles west of the actual border.
When you were heading there, did you go through Frankfurt, and did you have any downtime?
We stopped short of Frankfurt. The train stopped at Fulda. We got off the train. They met us with buses, took us to the Kaserne. We got oriented, went to our barracks, got assigned rooms, and went to work.
Was there any German training, language training going on to help you guys out at all?
There was not.
There was not.
There was not.
So you're in Germany now. It's probably late August 1962,
That's correct.
and you're immediately doing what you were trained to do. And what was that? What's your average everyday activities that you were doing on base or off of base?
The radio net that we were assigned to was copying messages from border patrol people that were on jeeps, actually going up and down the east-west German border on our side, with comments as to what they were observing on the east side. It would be the Russians or the East German soldiers, what they were doing, and we'd be copying messages from the fellows in the jeep as to what was going on the east side, and we would copy these messages 24 hours a day, and when we get the stack of messages, we'd take them down to the service center, where lieutenants and sergeants would go through them and see what was important, what's not important. But the radio net was operated 24 hours a day, so we had 8 on, 16 off, 8 on, 16 off. We rotated shifts, so it was round the clock.
So you never ever got used to any shift, because the next 16 you'd be on a different time frame.
It might have been a week on days and a week on swings and a week on midnights. I don't remember for sure, but we did alternate. We did have some time off.
Uh-huh.
There was a fourth guy, the actual leader. The fourth guy took up the slack for the days off and so on. But he was at E4, and we were all E3s, PFCs.
So you were there, and you were there during a very tense time period between the East and the West of the Cold War. It was one of the hotter times of the Cold War. Within a year of joining, we had the Berlin Wall incident between us and Germany, where the wall started going up. Cuban Missile Crisis in '62. So that whole time frame from '61 to '65 was pretty tense.
It was.
Did you feel that over there, that intense nature of it?
We did. The messages we were copying were actually pretty intense, not knowing what the East Germans were up to. You'd copy a message that would say 5 BCs, or border commandos, meaning the East Germans, in a Jeep or in a light utility vehicle moving northwest with AK-47s and a dog, just as an example, and with binoculars, and you wonder what they're doing, and they're wondering what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had an opportunity to go to Berlin, and I watched them build the Berlin Wall, which was pretty discouraging. They had East German workers doing the cement work, and Russian guards with AK-47s actually overseeing the work. And it was pretty tense. I went through checkpoint Charlie to get to East Berlin, and it was a lot of still bombed out buildings from World War II. Very depressing. And the people in West Berlin were happy to be in West Berlin. Berlin was surrounded by East Germany, so it was a island of freedom within East Germany.
Yeah. But when you were there, what mode of transportation did you get to Berlin? Did you go through via train, or were you aircraft bringing you in?
We flew into Tegelhof, I guess the airport is, and then walked. The city of Berlin, West Berlin, was small enough to walk around. I think we were there maybe 3 nights. I forget where we stayed. Just touring. We went into East Berlin and toured there. It was pretty intense.
Mm-hmm. How long at times were you in East Berlin? Was it just a few days at a time?
About 3 days.
Uh-huh. So when you were receiving information from troops on the border, from American forces or German forces on the border, Western forces, were you working with NATO troops, or were there strictly American forces?
American forces.
No other German or anything like that you worked with?
There were some West German soldiers. Yes, but we didn't interface with them at all.
You were mostly communicating always with American
Right.
forces and what their jobs were. Was there any testing back and forth between the Russian East German forces and American or West German forces, just to see what they could do, or did the Russian East German forces, like you said, you were following some of those bands? Did any of them, were they testing the borders just to see what reaction America would
Probably,
bring?
but I wasn't aware of it.
Uh-huh. None of that communication came through at all, at
No.
anything like that?
Not on my shifts.
Uh-huh.
It could have on somebody else's shift,
Yeah.
but nothing serious.
What were some? Do you remember any of the incidents that were on your shift that occurred that you have in your memory that was maybe out of character, out of place of the normal day, normal routine? Was there any events?
One night, I was on midnight shift. One night, there was a Morse code message came in that was very distant and hard to decode, hard to decipher. And I got bits and pieces of it. And it was not an SOS, but it was something serious, like an emergency. And I couldn't copy it all, so I took it down to the NCO in charge and said, "Here's what I've got. I can't figure it out." And I think it came from Nuremberg. Here's what I got. And that was the end of it that I knew about.
Mm-hmm. They double checked and see what was going on, I'm sure.
Never heard another word about it.
So what were you, you were just listening, and you were hooked up pretty strongly with American forces there on the border. And that's all the incoming information that you were getting, or your radio was picking up, or that you were dealing with.
Right. Just in Morse code, we were receiving messages from our guys actually on the border.
Were there a number of our guys, or was it
Yeah,
just a
there was
specific
just-
unit that you were dealing with?
I think in our sector, we probably had maybe 8 Jeeps deployed at any one given time that we were copying messages from.
Were you working alone in the radio?
Yes.
At the time, each shift you were there alone.
Right.
So there wasn't two of you kind of interpreting messages coming through and kind of bouncing things off each
You
other
were on your own.
on your own. You were there, you said, from late August '62, and how long were you there altogether in Berlin, or
I
in
rotated
Germany?
out, I think it was March 9th of 1964.
Okay. So you were there when some pretty important events happened. President Kennedy visited Germany while you were in Germany.
He did.
And it appears also that you were in Germany when his assassination took place.
We were.
What do you remember about both of those two events?
I was invited as one of the GIs from various bases in Germany, West Germany, to go to Frankfurt to participate in President Kennedy's welcoming ceremony, which is a lot of people. Very, very good, very good. And that was by invitation only, so I don't know how I got invited, but I did. And we went to Frankfurt and watched his motorcade and saluted him, of course. And then went back to the barracks. And we were also there, I was on duty when Kennedy was assassinated in November of '63. Very tense, very, very tense. Fulda is a part of Germany that's been historic as an invasion route from the east to the west. So when Kennedy was assassinated, we assumed that the east side, the Russians would take advantage of it and maybe launch an invasion. So we were issued live ammunition, put on alert for about 3 days before we were ordered to stand down. I couldn't go off base, just locked down more or less. And interesting, even the guys that were on leave and off base at the time of the assassination, when they heard about it, migrated back to the base on their own, knowing that something could happen. It was pretty tense. Also, the Cuban Missile Crisis was during roughly that same time, so it was pretty tense.
Yeah, pretty tense time period. Probably the most tense of the Cold War was right in that early '60 time frame, which you were all part of. What was your reaction? Did you have much reaction with the native German peoples in Fulda or in the countryside close around where your base was?
We did. Made some good friends, some good German national friends. Learned enough of German language to just get by. And we had several families of East and West Germans that we'd visit, invited to their birthday parties, their anniversaries, their special occasions. We felt very welcome. And most of the Germans spoke English, not fluently, but enough that we could communicate together. It was actually good times.
Did the conversation about the previous war that took place 15, 16 years before, did that ever enter in the conversation, what their feelings were concerning that time period in their
Not
lives?
much. Several of the gentlemen that were part of these extended German national families were Nazi troops, but we didn't talk about it.
Yeah,
We didn't talk about it.
yeah. What was their feeling that you perceived concerning about the Americans when you were there? Was it very positive?
Very happy that we're there. It could have been the Russians that occupied where we were, since the division, after the war was over, the division was arbitrary. And the folks who were in Fulda were very happy that that was not in a Russian sector.
Did you hear any stories from the West Germans about friends or relatives that unfortunately were caught on the east side
We
of the
did,
wall?
yeah. Some of our German national friends did have relatives in East Germany.
And I'm sure once the wall started going up, they had no idea when that was ever going to be able to see them again
That's true.
or communicate.
Getting back to the wall again, there were some incidents when I was copying messages that one of our guys would say, "Shots fired," from the east side. And we had no idea why. It was at night. Shots fired. We don't know if somebody was trying to escape, probably. Had no idea what the results were. Somebody was killed. No idea. But shots fired. That did come across occasionally.
Yeah. Now the East Germans and the Russians working together, they put up the Berlin Wall. They also put up fences across all the rural areas between the East and the West. How far were the fences away? And could you tell me a little bit about what the border actually looked like that you saw and
I
witnessed?
told it was about 3 miles, maybe 4 miles physically from the east-west German border. And the border was made up of twin barbed wire fences about maybe 10 yards apart with a plowed strip between them and electrified fence and most likely mined field in the plowed ground between the two fences. Very secure. Very, very secure border. Very few people escaped over the border.
How close was their barbed fences from the actual border? Was it right on it, or was it a little ways behind the border?
The part that I observed personally was that the actual fence was probably maybe 30 feet beyond the actual physical border that was marked by a concrete pillar that was identified as a true border. So there was a kind of a no man's land between that physical concrete post and the fence, the border fence.
Yeah. Did Americans have any fences or anything up on any of the parts of the border that you were ever aware of?
No.
What are some of the incidents that you can remember that stuck out? What was when President Kennedy was killed? Was that one of the things you remember most from your time over there, or what are some of your thoughts of the time period where it was either the most fearful or eventful while you were there in your 18
Probably the
months?
most fearful and eventful was President Kennedy's assassination. Bear in mind, we were isolated as far as receiving American news. There was German television, but we didn't understand German that well. And we didn't have, as I remember, we didn't have any German television on base, period. And there was no American radio stations other than Voice of America. And I was on duty at the time, so I didn't have Voice of America on. And I'm not sure how the majority of the troops got informed, but I'm sure the commanders got an instant notification from the Pentagon. I mean, there was probably no delay.
Yeah.
And how it got disseminated to the troops in the field might have been 2-3 hours. But it was tense.
Yeah. And during that tense period, you don't remember of anything happening out of the normal. So things were just
No.
tense, but there was no real
There was
events that
there
took
was no
place.
physical threat.
Did you do most of your job from the base camp, or were you out in the field at all with your radio?
Kind of mixed
Communication.
up. I spent a lot of time at the headquarters troop radio net, and then a couple times a year we'd go to field maneuvers at either Grafenwehr or Wildflicken, which were a ways distance. We had a convoy to either one of those two places, set up tents and set up field facilities, field mess hall. Slept out in sleeping bags in a tent, and worked in APCs with radio gear, talking to, again, on the field maneuver, these were all hypothetical maneuvers, so we'd be talking to people to just kind of play war games.
Did, when President Johnson came on board as president after the assassination of Kennedy, did you notice, was there anything different in your job, or was there anything different that occurred during his early months as president while you were still over there?
Not really,
So things has pretty much stayed the same.
The only difference was we had to eliminate President Kennedy as a commander-in-chief and substitute it with Johnson as in the chain of command.
Yeah. Did, of course, when did you get out, or when did you come out of Germany?
I think it was March 9th of '64.
And did you hear of anything going on in Vietnam at that point? Did that ever come up?
Oh, yes. When I got to be a short timer, that is, my draft status was a two-year commitment at active duty. And 18 months of that was in Germany, and as my rotation came up, the recruiting sergeants tried to get me to re-up for Vietnam. And I was a PFC at the time, PFC E3. And my orders had just come down in January before rotation to be promoted to E4. And the recruiting sergeant and the company commander brought me in and said, "We got your allocation for E4, and we'd like you to consider staying in the military." And I said, "My rotation is coming up in about a month. The E4 is not going to do me any good. Give it to the guy next behind me, because he's a 3-year guy, and he'll be here another year to actually get use out of the E4. But I'm not willing to re-up." Several of my buddies or friends did re-up, and I'm sure they went to Vietnam, and no idea what their status is.
Yeah, because that's right, when their Vietnamese government was falling apart, then we got very active in the summer of '64 with the Tonkin Gulf incident right after you were out, and then it just progressed from there. '65 was when troops went over in heavy numbers.
So I was very lucky, by the grace of God, to get out when I did.
So you ended up getting out in the spring of '64 then, out of Germany?
I rotated out of Germany March 9th, as I remember, and went to Bremerhaven, Germany, on a train. Spent probably 2 or 3 nights in Bremerhaven, waiting for the ship to dock and unload so that we could get aboard. So I went back to the States on the USNS Rose across the North Atlantic in mid-March. Instead of 5 days, it took us 9 days to get back. Rough seas.
So you came over on the Buckner and you went back on the Rose.
Correct.
Where did you land at with the Rose? Stateside.
Brooklyn Navy Terminal. And once we got off the ship and mustered out, you're on your own. You're in uniform, you're on your own. It's on your own to get home.
So you were mustered out immediately once
Right.
once you came into Brooklyn.
Right.
They didn't send you to any other bases or anything like
that.
that.
Was it. You're out the door, out the gate door, you're on your own. And it was a rainy, nasty, cloudy day, and the airport was shut down. So I didn't want to hang around New York City. So I went to the railroad station and tried to get a ticket to Chicago. And the ticket agent said, actually, military on-duty personnel are entitled to half rate. He said, but you've been mustered out, you're not entitled to a half rate. I said, how about if I tell you that I worked for the Milwaukee Railroad for 3 years before coming into the military as a signalman? He says, you got the half rate.
How long was the trip from New York to Chicago?
Overnight.
Overnight?
They went up through Canada. It was overnight, but I was glad to be away from New York City and on my own, still in uniform.
Yeah. What was the homecoming like when you made it back to Illinois?
It was great. Got to Chicago Union Station and took another train out to Park Ridge. Took a cab home. Never did tell my folks I was home. Took a cab home. Walked up the front porch steps, rang the doorbell, and my cousin's wife and my cousin with his wife were there. She answered the door. Big hug. And Mom and Dad couldn't believe it.
That was good. So, when your military career was over at that point,
Pretty much.
what did you do? Did you go back to work for the railroad then?
I did. Went to back on a signal gang, construction gang. I think I went back to Iowa and South Dakota. And during that next 4 months, I was away from home. And my mother was getting registered letters from the Department of Defense and the Department of the Army that she had to sign for. And they wouldn't give them to her because it was registered to me. They wouldn't let her have them. So finally, she talked the postmaster into giving her the letter. She opened it, and it was the fourth National Guard meeting that I had missed. The next one I would have been reactivated to active duty.
Did you know any about this, about
No,
having to be in the
nothing.
National Guard or as far as reserve?
I probably did by reading my orders, but I didn't pay any attention to it
Yeah.
because I was assigned to a Army Reserve outfit. But I went back to work. So Mother got hold of me. They called me on the phone. I came back, got permission from the foreman to come back, and went to one meeting. And I also talked to my top boss on the railroad, told him the circumstances. He said, "I'll write you a letter and get you out of that," and he did. I had a letter from the railroad that I was traveling all over the system, and I would not be home to attend these meetings. That needed to be excused, and it worked. That got me excused. So I had no further
Commitment.
reserve commitment. Right.
How long had the meetings been missed? Was it over a year span or 2 years that you'd missed
No.
meetings or short
We
term?
had a meeting every month, and I missed 4 of them, so it was
Okay.
like September or so when I
Just a
finally-
few months into
Yeah.
it's when,
Right. Yeah, they were pretty hot. And where the hell have you been?
yeah. See, he didn't get the information, huh?
Yeah.
So has your military experience, do you feel, what's your feelings towards it as far as, did it aid you in your future employment at all? Or any benefits to your life since you got out of the military for having
Oh yeah,
served?
being a veteran, it's an honor to be a veteran. And yes, I don't take advantage of it, but I do appreciate when I'm recognized as a veteran. Yes, indeed. It was a good experience. I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but it was a good experience. Serve your country.
If someone came up to you today that was 18 years of age and debating whether to go into the Army or not, what would you tell them?
I'd say go to the military. Spend some time in the military.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to tell anyone about your service or anything? This is a good time. If there's anything left.
I got after the Berlin Wall came down. I forget when it did come down after
89.
'89. Somebody sent me a chunk of the wall, a little chunk of the Berlin Wall. So it's kind of interesting that I saw it being built, and now I got a chunk of it in my hand after it's been torn down.
What was your feeling, since you brought up the Berlin Wall, after having been there when all that was going on and with the building of it? What was your feeling when it started coming down?
Very positive. I was very happy that it came down. Yeah, it was a terrible situation to have the east and west turbines split.
Yeah.
It really was. On the boat trip coming back on the USNS Rose, I took a little diary thing. I won't read it all. The first couple days were calm. On the 4th day at sea very rough. Morning and becoming calm in the afternoon, then getting rough again. And I was assigned to KP duty, which was good duty because I had good food. But a lot of guys were sick, throwing up. The 5th day at sea, very rough. Sure doesn't seem like a Sunday. People are getting sick. Guys in the mess hall were throwing up on the trays, the food trays. I mean, it was really bad. The 7th day at sea, very heavy winds, rough seas. Wednesday, 8th day at sea, beginning to calm. the 9th ASC, we were coming into the harbor at New York. It was great to see the Statue of Liberty. We all cheered. Going out on the Buckner, we were very solemn, leaving the U.S. and watching the Statue of Liberty fall behind us.
Yeah.
But very cheering when we saw it. We knew we were home.
Yeah. That's a good symbol.
Yeah, sure it is.
Well, thank you very much for your
Okay,
service,
thanks,
and
Jim.
thank you for doing the interview, Bill.
You bet. Glad to do it.